koutou katoa, Joe Gelfon toko ingoa, ko tako mihi ki Aotearoa Circle. Hi everybody, I'm Joe Gelfon, Chief Operating Officer at the Aotearoa Circle. I'm super delighted to be hosting today's webinar and really appreciate you making the time to join us today. Thank you. We've got somebody dialing in from Kenya. That's exciting. But before we get underway, I'd just like to acknowledge that this webinar is made possible with the support of our partners who you see on screen here today. I'd also like to acknowledge the support of our guardians and our RAP. Your support is hugely appreciated, and we're super proud to be working alongside you. For those that are new to the Circle, just a quick word on who we are. We convene leaders across the public and private sector, and together we're working at pace to restore Aotearoa's natural capital by hopefully 2035. And our intent is to do that to ensure that we have enduring and long-term prosperity with a healthy natural capital enabling that. We're action-orientated. We're delivering practical cross-sector solutions that reduce risk and strengthen resilience. This work is made possible through, again, the support of our amazing partners and recognising that no organisation can do this alone. So today's session speaks to one of our more recent pieces of work, which is the Natural Infrastructure Plan, and arguably one of our biggest, with over 200 collaborators involved. We released it at Parliament in March earlier this year. And the premise of the plan is that, traditionally we consider infrastructure in terms of concrete and steel, but a healthy wetland, a dune or a forest delivers much the same benefits, holding back flood water, steadying our coastlines and protecting the land around them. And that protection has real economic worth, yet it's really counted when we're planning or investing in infrastructure. So today is about demonstrating how considering all the infrastructure options, both the grey and the green, presents us with multiple benefits, and why natural infrastructure is a valuable and credible tool in the infrastructure kit. The session also builds on our most recent webinar, which we held around risk to resilience and natural capital, with the intent to demonstrate how we can move from concept to case studies and practical application. Well, our most recent webinar focused on the why of natural infrastructure, risk reduction, system resilience, long-term value. This session focused more on how practitioners can use the Natural Infrastructure Plan in real projects. Shortly, Sam Parsons, who's the Nature and Climate Change Specialist at Boffa Miskell, is going to be sharing his approach to the application of our benefits and evaluation framework and the investment decision toolkit, which sit both within the Natural Infrastructure Plan. He's going to speak to 2 live projects that have put natural infrastructure to work on the ground, and how our plan's infrastructure decision toolkit is helping locate opportunities, weigh up benefits, and deliver a difference on the ground. Shortly, you'll also hear how the plan's tools and frameworks are helping guide decision-making for better outcomes, and you'll also have the chance to ask Sam some questions. We've already received some. We will be taking those, going through those after Sam has spoken, but if you have got some others, please drop them into the chat function. We will try to cover off as many as we can, and if not, we will come back to you after this session with those. But for now, let me get underway and hand things over to Sam. Thank you so much, Sam.
Thank you everyone for your time today. So g'day, I'm Sam. I'm the Climate and Nature Specialist at Boffa Miskell. And today, as Joe said, I'm going to be talking about the Natural Infrastructure Plan and how some of its parts can be picked up and used to deliver positive change for nature across New Zealand. So over the course of last year and earlier this year, I worked with the team from the Aotearoa Circle and their partners to help develop the Natural Infrastructure Plan. As a nature and climate change specialist, a lot of my work at the moment and over the past number of years now has been focused on helping others to better understand nature and, more importantly, value its critical role in our economy, our collective resilience and our well-being. It's not something that's always the easiest job. It's a topic that's inherently complex and interconnected, and while something that most Kiwis really care about, it's not something that's historically been valued all that well or invested in appropriately. So that's why I jumped at the opportunity to support the Natural Infrastructure Plan. For me, it helps elevate the discussion about nature in New Zealand and provides some really good tools to help us value it better and make good decisions about its use across the country. So as I said, today I'm going to be talking about the Natural Infrastructure Plan and how some of its parts can be used, specifically the tools. The plan itself, it seeks to help shift the national thinking and systems so that natural infrastructure, things like native forests, wetlands, rivers, floodplains and dune systems, are recognised and valued as essential infrastructure, the same way we do with roads, electricity networks and three waters. As you can see on screen, there was a ton of work that went into the Natural Infrastructure Plan. I always think it's good to really recognise the amount of stuff that came out of it as well. So across all of the 8 resources, and I know most people online would have read all 8 cover to cover, there's some great information and ambitious actions that need to be considered by those in powers. But as someone with little power, but a lot of capacity for doing, I see the real gold in the Natural Infrastructure Plan being within the investment decision toolkit and the case studies. It's the investment decision toolkit they'll be focusing on today. And before going on, I firstly want to acknowledge all the work that Erica Miles did in preparing this and everything else that sits in the Natural Infrastructure Plan, amongst others. Did a fantastic job, and I think working across the millions of minds from the Aotearoa circle has come out with something quite usable and practical, and I think that in its own is a hell of a challenge. So hats off to Erica, wherever she is today. So the investment decision toolkit provides the business case tools for natural infrastructure. It includes a set of underlying investment principles to ensure credibility when considering natural infrastructure, along with an investment evaluation model to help objectively assess the multiple benefits of natural infrastructure. So there's a lot of things in there, and I'll explain how I've used them in a few projects and how they may be considered in other projects today. The why for natural infrastructure is covered in detail in the Natural Infrastructure Plan. And if you've attended any of these workshops or events over the past year, you've probably already heard me talk at length about it. But as I see it, as a consultant sourcing work in the market today, trying to drive natural infrastructure, the drivers for businesses and government agencies considering nature and natural infrastructure seem to be a combination of those 3 points on screen, and often not all 3 at once. The common themes across all, but often the lesser driver, is the environmental imperative. Degrading the ecosystem services that we depend upon is not good business. That should be a really clear, simple message for us. But as I said, it's not often the most important driver for businesses and for government agencies. And that's very apparent when you look at New Zealand's decline in investment in biodiversity. The second and more common driver is the strategic alignment. Improving ecosystem services can be a slow and often invisible outcome, particularly where we don't measure it. Whereas meeting ESG benchmarks and delivering upon policy requirements, they provide a more immediate social license and or consent to operate. So often they really push this work forward in New Zealand. The third, and I think more exciting driver, particularly for me, is the market opportunities that nature provides through either improving resilience and productivity of our existing economic activities that depend on nature, or creating new business opportunities on their own through things like nature credit markets, carbon, and other green market opportunities. So those 3 drivers seem to be 1, 2, or 3 of the things that really seem to be stimulating work for natural infrastructure in New Zealand at the moment. Just touching on these in a bit more detail, as I said, while the environmental imperative for natural infrastructure is inherent in our economy, it's often the quieter driver for businesses. But I don't think that's through a lack of caring. It's more, from my perspective, speaking plainly, through a lack of political will, understanding, and a mandate to operate for people working across the country. But the key message that needs to continually be pushed is that almost every sector in our economy is dependent, either directly or indirectly, on nature and its services. So when we inadequately value and care for nature, it creates a more risky and volatile economy. And speaking broadly, as the core of this is our natural assets, the land, water, seas, biodiversity and atmosphere that support life. From these assets flow ecosystem services, the regulating, supporting, provisioning and cultural services, everything from food and fibre to the cycling of nutrients, the regulation of water flows and stabilising of land. And from these services, benefits flow to businesses. These are critical to the performance and resilience of our economic activities across the country. So that's kind of the environmental imperative in a nutshell. But at present, they all face a range of pressures from the key drivers of nature change. Things like land use change. Don't pay attention to where these icons fall, because land use change affects all of the things in those bubbles. But things like land use change that disrupt the natural function of a catchment, unsustainable resource use, pollution of natural resources and ecosystems, the introduction and spread of invasive species and diseases like bird flu most recently, and the ongoing effects of climate change. All of these combine and interact with our natural assets to disrupt and damage and degrade the flow of ecosystem services that our economy rely upon. So it's a bit of a clear message. When we poorly manage our natural assets, these pressures, these drivers of nature change, they continue to bugger up our natural assets. They degrade the ecosystem services and they hurt our economy. So that is our core imperative for doing natural infrastructure. The second, and as I said, kind of the more strategic aspect that seems to be a quicker win for delivering natural infrastructure or entering the conversation, is the strategic alignment. And look, there's a lot of strategic reasons for businesses to manage their natural infrastructure, all of which are often specific to the location, their sector and their structure. So I won't go into those. But looking ahead, I think the potential changes coming through the planning reform, they provide a great opportunity for scaling the use of natural infrastructure in New Zealand. On the cards at the moment, we have the Natural Environment Bill, the Planning Bill and the Climate Change Amendment Bill. And from these, two key requirements, amongst other things, of course, one being regional spatial planning and the other being local adaptation planning, with the priority locations for adaptation planning being identified through the regional spatial planning process. So without going into all of what should or could be done under these bills, I see there's a real opportunity for proactive natural infrastructure planning to play a significant role in helping support and inform both of these adaptation and regional spatial plans. By identifying critical natural infrastructure at a local and regional level, we can both inform where and how natural infrastructure can support regional change and growth in a regional spatial plan, and the location and use of nature-based solutions to manage climate risks and local adaptations plans. But as I said, this needs to be done proactively, i.e. now, because we know to be truly cost effective and beneficial, we need to be considering natural infrastructure at the outset of a planning process, not try to crowbar it in amongst a whole lot of other things as a nice to have at the end. So for anyone considering these things coming down the turnpike later this year, undertaking a process to really understand natural infrastructure values across a regional catchment, what can be done, what should be done, and what the benefits of those interventions may be, will provide really critical information in my eyes to both informing regional spatial planning and ensuring that local adaptation plans do deliver good practical outcomes beyond just finding places for managed retreat. If we can look into the upper catchment areas and know what kind of interventions are going to support lower catchment values, then we're onto a real winner here and a real cost-effective approach for adaptation. Finally, sorry, just picking on that last theme there of drivers, before I move on, the market opportunities for progressing towards a nature positive approach, I think, provide a really exciting conversation for natural infrastructure in New Zealand. With many of our economic sectors dependent on nature and its services, this creates risks for businesses, as I've already talked about in the environmental imperatives. But on the flip side, if you can effectively manage and enhance this in natural infrastructure, then you can create opportunities. These may be in the form of better resilience to climate change or natural hazards, greater productivity, or access to new green market opportunities. The common theme across identifying and accessing these opportunities, though, is data. It is hard to value what is poorly managed, which is a nice segue in itself into the Aotearoa Circle's next program of work on natural capital accounting. There's a lot of change happening in nature markets internationally and in New Zealand too. So in short, if I was a large holder or a large asset manager in New Zealand today, I'll be really excited by the opportunities that could be gleaned from protecting and enhancing the natural capital that my sector or my business depends upon and creating new opportunities. And before I go on as well, for anyone who hasn't read it, I do recommend that the work Ian Herbert, who I just saw was in Kenya somehow, has done on the New Zealand Biofin assessment is really worth a read. And in his most recent report, he proposes a natural capital fund for enhancing natural capital, particularly the things that our economy depends upon. So worth a read if you're interested in the opportunities that can come from interventions like that. So that's the why. I think it's always important that we still consider the why and don't take that for granted. On to the how the natural infrastructure plan tools can be used to better understand and apply natural infrastructure in New Zealand. I'm going to be referring to two projects in this, one of which was with the team at Christchurch International Airport and the other with the team at Meridian Energy. These are two teams that Boffa Miskell has worked a lot with over the years, and teams I've really enjoyed working with as they continue to progress their nature programs. While they both operate in very different industries at different scales and have, I guess, different structures, they do have similar characteristics, which makes this work, I think, nice to communicate the different options here. They both have a fair chunk of land and assets under their management. Of course, Meridian being exponentially larger than Christchurch Airport. They are innovative and ambitious to support positive change, but they also practical and pragmatic. They see the need and recognise the need to balance the need to be ambitious with what evidence shows us is achievable. So that last point there is a real key for me. Everything that we do in nature-based solutions and natural infrastructure, if we take a misstep, we can lead us down to a path of maladaptation and I think further entrenched skepticism and misunderstanding about natural infrastructure. So ensuring that what we do works practically, pragmatically, is a real core ingredient, and all the ingredients to do great things for nature and natural infrastructure across these two businesses. Both projects, across Meridian and Christchurch Airport, are strategic in nature. For Christchurch Airport, we've been working to support them in the development of their biodiversity transition plan. As a major landholder in Christchurch Airport are mindful of the environmental footprint and influence of what they do. The airport landholding also includes a number of ecologically significant areas in Christchurch, of which the airport are caretakers of these special places. So to guide their biodiversity transition plan, Christchurch Airport are seeking to align with the global biodiversity framework targets as well. So the question we're seeking to address through this project and through the use of these natural infrastructure plan tools is what nature projects should be prioritised that will help Christchurch Airport progress towards its targets and deliver the greatest co-benefits across their business. So they've got a land holding, they've got a million things they could be doing. What are the things that are going to be best for them and their targets and their business? For Meridian, we've been working with them over the past few years to support them to better locate and evaluate their nature-related impacts and dependencies across the operational areas, that being wind farms, hydro schemes, carbon forestry, a solar farm and battery storage now, really diverse land holdings, really diverse interactions with nature at place, and a lot of great conservation work that has been done historically. I started my first work with Meridian was when I was with Department of Conservation through their partnership with the Kakapo Recovery Fund. So I know some of the great stuff they do, but it's that measurement and elevating all of the good stuff into a reportable and comparable state that has always been the challenge. So there's been a lot of our work over the past few years. Initially, this was strategically aligned to improve reporting for the Dow Jones best-in-class indices and other disclosure requirements. But more recently, the conversation has continued to grow into what are the opportunities across their land holdings to support more positive outcomes, both for nature and for Meridian as a business generating renewable energy. Similar to Christchurch Airport, part of this is about improving data and information to support any future nature targets as well. So they can be confident that any ambitious target they do choose to set in future years has the means to be practically achievable as well. So there's the underlying tone in there of looking ahead and what can be done, what should be done, and what is achievable and best for business and for New Zealand. In terms of how we've supported these projects, our approaches have been adapted to be bespoke for both projects and the business needs, but they possess similar ingredients. These are a spatial analysis to help us locate the various interactions with nature across operational areas and adjacent locations, the application of place-based expertise to better evaluate the actual extent of these interactions, these impacts and dependencies at place, and the use of the investment decision toolkit from the Natural Infrastructure Plan to support the assessment and comparison of opportunities to inform next steps. Now, there's probably a few clever people who noticed that I did touch on a few of the key themes from the TNFD LEAP process. Yes, I did. And there's two main reasons for doing so and why we seek to align where we can with that process. The first is that the TNFD process is a really nice pragmatic framework for identifying and responding to nature-related risks and opportunities for businesses. It is a clunky and complex thing when you try to adhere to the strict structure of it. But when we strip back some of the malarkey and adapt it to work for the business or the place that we're focusing on, it works well and it is well recognised approach externally, so there's merit there. The second reason that we seek to align is to ensure that the work we do delivers outputs that can be reused for other purposes, whether this is meeting new disclosure requirements, sector reporting, or doing a full TNFD process in future years. The greater alignment that we can have, the greater value for money that we can provide our clients, because it's going to provide reusable, easily transferable information to support those processes. So those are the three key ingredients that we've applied to both projects, both differently, but both similar in nature. Starting with the Natural Infrastructure Plan Investment Decision Toolkit and scoping these assessments, we've applied the investment principles for supporting natural infrastructure investment. And starting from the outside of the circle inwards, these are Te Tai, the environment, so ensuring that the inherent environmental imperative is the foundation for our work, for the projects that we're evaluating and for the outcomes that we're seeking to achieve. Secondly, people. The projects need to be socially and culturally appropriate and relevant across places. Thirdly, the strategic alignment. So we start to get into these little bubbles in the middle now. The projects are aligned to the infrastructure priorities of these businesses, and being both an airport and a renewable energy generation business with hydro schemes and wind farms, that's a very important consideration because we don't want to be putting the wrong values in the wrong places that aren't cohesive with those operations. Fourthly, the value for money. These projects need to deliver some form of direct or indirect benefits from the investment. At the end of the day, these are businesses and all investment should deliver good, positive outcomes and be measured appropriately. And lastly, the deliverability of the projects. All projects must be practically achievable. We're not pie in the sky thinking. We want to be ensuring that we're informing good forward-looking progress for nature. These principles outlined in the investment decision toolkits, they're really sound, not only for helping to prioritise projects, but for helping to make the case across an organisation for the value of projects, because as I said, the environmental imperative is not always the key driver in all groups. So whilst being able to evaluate projects across all of these principles, we can make different cases to different audiences for what their value is and communicate, I guess, the values on things that are going to resonate for certain decision makers across different groups. So really good principles there for structuring and scoping these evaluations to come. In terms of applying those 5 principles for both projects, we first conducted a spatial analysis across land holdings in adjacent areas This analysis provided us with insights at a landscape level as to what the ecological values are present across the landscape, what operating constraints may be present, things like landholder agreements, covenants, leases, zoning, and what features exist at the parcel level that may support or restrict nature projects, like in both these cases, operational activities that aren't necessarily coexist well with certain biodiversity features. Now, in New Zealand, spatial data sets for ecological values can be patchy on face value. So when applied across a national portfolio, like in Meridian's case, there are limitations to the level of detail provided, but it does tell us more than enough about what there is and where further investigation is required. For Christchurch Airport, we're able to incorporate council data sets available to improve this analysis, whereas for Meridian, because we're comparing sites from Ruakaka Solar Farm in the north to the Manapori Hydro Scheme and Whitehill Wind Farm in the south, we had to depend on nationally available data sets with clear kind of coverage consistently applied across the country. However, for both of these need to be improved by site-specific expertise to validate what the spatial analysis is telling us and provide a finer level of detail to inform evaluation, which leads on to that next ingredient I was talking about, the place-based expertise. This information is important to ensure we develop a strong and credible understanding of how suitable, practical, and beneficial nature-related projects may be at place. Nature-related risks and opportunities are highly location-specific and often dictated by the extent of those 5 drivers for nature change I spoke to earlier: the land use change, resource use, pollution, invasive pests, and climate change. While spatial information that is available either nationally or locally for ecological values may be patchy, through our resource management system, through our environmental NGOs and local environmental initiatives, we can often source some really good information for sites about what is there, why it's there, and what its current state is. In worst case scenario, we can just go out there and make new observations. So there's nothing stopping us from going out and gazing at the ground and seeing what is there. So site-specific information is important. With Meridian, with their operational sites, we've been able to mine through a wealth of ecological information and data specific to each site through a combination of their ecological impact assessments, consent monitoring requirements, and site operator observations. And that alone has, I think, provided us with close to probably 90% of the information that we need to really scope good projects and understand all of the interactions, impacts, dependencies, risks and opportunities across a portfolio. With Christchurch International Airport, this place-based information was gathered through a combination of new site observations from our ecologists going out and assessing the site, insights from local land managers, and also data gathered through their maintenance crews about species observations, plant coverage, land cover across the airport campus area. In both cases, we work closely with the ecologists familiar with the site to ensure that we have developed a really accurate understanding of the present day values, ensuring that where we do rely on historic data, that we capture any changes that may have occurred in recent years. So through spatial analysis and place-based expertise for both clients, we are able to develop a clear picture of where their land holdings are and how they interact with nature, what their actual extent of these interactions, impacts and dependencies are, and what, most importantly, what locations best lend themselves to conserving, restoring or enhancing natural value. That leads us to evaluate, compare and prioritise what nature projects would provide the greatest benefit to either Christchurch Airport or Meridian, which is where the investment decision toolkit comes back into play. Using the investment evaluation model from the toolkit, we've been able to compare the values, characteristics and benefits of each location and the potential nature project. Now, there's no way of showing a really big Excel spreadsheet in any kind of pretty fashion, so sorry for the slide and a screenshot of an Excel workbook. But the evaluation model itself, I think, is a really good tool. It's been developed to support the multiple benefits for a nature-based solution to an infrastructure challenge. It includes 38 key benefit indicators across financial, risk and resilience, environmental, social and cultural domains. And it's all in Excel, as I said, so it's really adaptable. And I think that's one of the keys of it. As I said, our approach for each project and any project going forward is being adapted to be bespoke for both the project and the business needs. The evaluation model is the starting point. It needs to be refined and adapted to be fit for need, fit for purpose. So in these cases, using the investment evaluation model for each project, we made some tweaks to ensure it gave us the insights we needed and the outcomes each client needed. Firstly, while the model has been established to be qualitative in nature through the spatial analysis and place-based expertise, we've added additional quantitative inputs to inform our evaluation through site-specific measures and thresholds. So measures like parcel size, land cover percentage, proximity to values like protected areas or riparian values have all been input into this model to help provide some quantitative aspects throughout the evaluation. We've gone through and we've excluded all relevant indicators. Important to know that there are 38 in there and not all of them are going to be relevant or measurable across projects in your portfolio. So go out and trim and cut it down as you need. We've incorporated business-specific indicators and metrics as well. As I said, in Christchurch Airport's project, they're looking to align with 4 of the targets out of the Global Biodiversity Framework. So lifting some of the indicators and recommended metrics from the GBF, we've incorporated these into the evaluation framework as well to understand what alignment each project provides in that respect. And we've also incorporated the use of a weighted attributes evaluation to support prioritisation. Each one has been done differently, but factoring in things like different amount of weighting or priority that's put on cost, biodiversity benefit, social outcomes, cost value for money, reduced operating expenditure, community engagement. We've been able to play with those weightings and see what projects fit best and make better comparisons across natural infrastructure project versus natural infrastructure project. And finally, we've also used this and the outputs to visualize the the evaluation outcomes. So where we do have a large national holding of 1 million different parcels across a landholder, being able to score them and then reflect that spatially, so we can see where the green parcels are, where opportunities best sit, where the green or orange or blue is, and where the red areas that don't necessarily stack up or provide great value for money. So we can easily use that as a nice engaging product for the clients to socialise any change across the business. By adapting and building off the investment decision toolkit and more specifically the evaluation model, whilst we've delivered different things for different clients, it has provided us with the means to consistently compare the multiple benefits of projects of different scopes, scales and locations, and provide a means to, I think, take a tool and tweak it slightly for this purpose, tweak it slightly for this purpose, and the intention is to continue to apply it in different ways and continue to grow both its use and application for New Zealand businesses and ideally government agencies as well. Referring back to those key principles from the toolkit, it provides us with some really good insights we found required to support good decision making. Those being what locations are most suitable for interventions, i.e. what's the strategic alignment, what locations are interventions practically achievable, i.e. the deliverability, and what locations would the interventions be most beneficial, i.e. what's going to give us the best value for money. So I think the tool as a test case in 2 different projects now, and we've pulled and pushed in all different ways, is giving us some really good insights to help decision making for natural infrastructure or nature restoration. In terms of other outcomes from the toolkit and the process that is provided for our clients, we've used the toolkit and provided it as the basis for a repeatable decision-making framework. So we've formatted it and structured it in a way that it can be continued to be added to and reused. So any new site or proposed project in future can be incorporated and consistently evaluated to see how it stacks up in comparison to existing priorities and projects. As I said earlier, reusable information for things like disclosure and reporting is key. And I think this provides a really nice home and a really nice structure for that information for any kind of external reporting. Providing engaging material, things like the maps that just provides a really nice national overview of where priority locations, where best value for money sit. I think it provides a useful tool to help socialise change across businesses. It provides core insights required to inform ambitious yet practically achievable nature targets, particularly when businesses are considering things like aligning with the Global Biodiversity Framework 30% target. What does 30% mean across your portfolio, and what combination and configuration of projects will provide the best value for money for achieving that target? And it provides a clear hierarchy of priority nature projects that can be considered for next steps. So that's really the key outcome for both of these projects, is what comes next, how is it done? But we know that we're providing, I guess, forcing effort where the greatest benefits have been evaluated to exist. So in conclusion, and I do want to leave time for questions, if I can recommend 3 takeaway key messages from today, they are: the Natural Infrastructure Investment Decision Toolkit is good. It provides some really good guidance and tools to help make the business case for natural infrastructure. But to make these work for you, they are adaptable for a reason, so adapt them to be fit for purpose. The second key message: don't lose sight of the environmental imperative for natural infrastructure, both through the evaluation and communication of it. The more you do in this space, the easier it is to take for granted that everyone understands and cares about it. They don't, so they need help. So use this as a means to support that discussion. And lastly, for those councils and infrastructure agencies online, now is a really good time to consider how natural infrastructure can inform the planning priorities coming into play later this year. And the investment decision toolkit and evaluation model can really, I think, be applied quite practically to help make good decisions in that space and inform what can be done where and how they feed up and down to those various regional spatial plans and local adaptation plans. So that's me today. Happy to field any questions. I know we've had a few, and I have seen a few popping up in my periphery on my other screen. So I think I'll stop sharing and pass over to Jo.
Thank you so much, Sam. Yeah, we've had some really interesting questions come up, but that was really fantastic. Thank you so much. And as you say, perhaps now is almost like a perfect storm in terms of what's happening with the regional spatial plans and local adaptation plans. And you really talked about how valuable the investment decision toolkit, the value that can play in being prepared for that change now. So thank you for that. And you obviously talked too about Christchurch Airport and Meridian, obviously quite different organisations in this instance with different priorities. And you obviously mentioned data as sort of one key thing that both entities were looking for. We know there's lots of data out there. It's available in a whole range of different forms, perhaps just not in the one place. So I guess there could be an opportunity for that piece of the puzzle to come together to advance, the investment and decision making around natural infrastructure. Is that something, that data piece, something that you see maybe an MCERT could contribute to? Is it an opportunity for some entities to come together? I think there was also a question around making use of data from the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, which MMB also administers.
Yes, look, a central repository for data and thinking the Global Biodiversity Information Framework, or whatever F stood for in that acronym, I think would be a really good space for that, and ensuring that we have better connections, particularly through the private sector, into that database would be a great start for New Zealand. So I think it would be a really good step for someone like MCERT to be considering and advancing in the coming years. it's still not going to ignore the fact that some data is commercially sensitive, or some data just isn't suitable for the public sphere. So helping businesses understand where that data may be held internally, whether it's through the consenting process, through their operation teams, or otherwise, I think helps us progress in that down the right pathway as well. From the data I've seen though, we always have gaps. That's kind of the key of data, is you never quite have everything you want. But when we can being able to identify what those gaps are and put in place the right building blocks to fill them, I think is going to, I guess, provide us the insights we need to make really good choices around natural infrastructure. But I think the key here is that we do have enough at present to make good choices. It's just a matter of trying to find where it is and how to access it and doing the legwork to find it.
Mm-hmm. The toolkit was created to compare both, hard grey infrastructure projects versus grey natural infrastructure. Did the two case studies that you've spoken to, your two clients, assess other grey infrastructure options, or was it just between natural options that were considered?
In this case, we've used both natural options versus natural options. We've configured the evaluation and tested it to ensure that non-natural grey infrastructure or grey development can be input through that process as well and give us comparable results. But in this case, it has been primarily through a kind of a conservation restoration lens that we've been evaluating projects.
And I guess as we're going through this sort of reform and the planning and environmental legislation process, what opportunities do you see for banks and insurers to move beyond providing funding and cover to enable growth and investment through international national infrastructure? So there's the potential to say support more productive land or make more resilient communities or secure supply chains.
Yeah, look, I think the finance sector, both through the banks and insurers, probably have the biggest role to play or the greatest influence that they can bring to bear for natural infrastructure. And I think one of the keys that come into that is how are they assessing the current state of natural infrastructure and natural assets at place, how are they identifying the integrity and trajectory of those natural assets. Are they degrading or are they being protected and enhanced? And how are they recognising or rewarding good stewardship and restoration of natural infrastructure across areas? And it's a difficult question because often the natural infrastructure goes well beyond someone's land tenure where you're seeking lending for. So it's not the most straightforward question, but yeah, I think if they really come to play, that's going to, I think, probably create the greatest change in New Zealand in terms of conservation and also climate change resilience.
Mm-hmm. And sort of continuing on that sort of finance theme, how should natural infrastructure investments be prioritised against traditional infrastructure investments by councils, for example, who face fixed capital budgets? And how should resilience benefits be valued where avoided losses are uncertain or even decades away?
Yeah, look, I think they should be valued similarly to how we value grey infrastructure at present. I think one of the challenges for natural infrastructure is we don't value it as infrastructure, we value it as amenity or some kind of other value. If we were to appropriately measure it, value it and plan for it appropriately, and then compare it to grey infrastructure. In a lot of cases, we'll say, oh, well, natural infrastructure has a greater cost-benefit ratio. It's a more cost-effective, it's going to deliver greater co-benefits across, well, it's going to deliver the infrastructure outcome, but it's also going to achieve X, Y, Z for biodiversity, cultural values, social values, well-being, and so on. The challenge we always have, though, is that we haven't done those analysis. Natural infrastructure comes into the equation, or nature-based solutions is considered far too late in the planning process, and in which case we're trying to crowbar in very discrete interventions into a landscape. And in that case, we often don't get a good cost-benefit ratio. They aren't the most cost-effective interventions because they are very discrete. They ignore a whole lot of interactions that they depend upon and impact, and they just don't quite achieve the benefits that they could or should. So yeah, I think getting to that place really early in the planning piece, which I was saying through regional spatial planning and local adaptation planning, would help achieve that.
You talked about the quieter driver being that environmental and imperative. But one of the questions was, how can we value the natural environment the way that we may value our house?
I think natural capital accounting is a really good place to start. So I think everyone stay tuned for what the Aotearoa Circle is going to help people deliver next. But being able to essentially account for your natural assets and value them in the scheme of your operation or your business or your location would push us a long way along that pathway.
Yeah.
So yeah, excited to see what the boot camp, what's coming in the boot camps in a few weeks.
How could an investor use the investment evaluation model in their investment process to better support the ambitions of the National Infrastructure Plan?
Yeah, I think the investment evaluation model provides a really good tool for that. Firstly, it has to be adapted to meet the investor's priorities and their structure and their limitations, as we've done for other projects. But then it's going to provide the means of comparing investment against investment across different scopes, scales, and complexity, and deliver a similar evaluation outcome, whether that's a score on a scale or distribution of scores across those benefits. I think that's really where I see the value of that evaluation model, is being able to provide comparable outcomes to inform decisions and prioritise where effort is spent, whether that's investment or time.
So we've talked, obviously, the session has really been about moving, the plan off desktops and putting it into practice. In your experience, what's the single biggest thing that stops a good plan becoming a real project? And where do you suggest practitioners would start if they're facing some resistance?
I think the big roadblock, and everyone faces their own internal hurdles. The big roadblock is having the confidence to back a decision that, particularly if you've got a national or international portfolio and land holdings across the country, how can you be confident that spending X amount of money here and time and effort is going to provide the greatest value for your company across all the other priorities you have? So there's where I think the investment decision framework and that evaluation model helps really run every option through that cutter and come out with a clear priority of, these are the 5 best projects across all of the co-benefits that could be delivered that we think is best for our company, our priorities, our strategy, and this is where we'll continue to invest time and money and effort. So that is where I think the evaluation framework provides real benefit and helps overcome that challenge of kind of paralysis through too many damn options of so many things can be done and so many things need to be done and should be done. Of where do you start?
Thank you so much. Is there any closing comments that you'd like to make, Sam, before we wrap things up?
No, I'm conscious there's other questions I've seen popping up. If I haven't answered them all today, or if you do have any other questions, by all means, please either get in touch with myself or you, Joe, and we can answer them over email or another time. Happy to continue the discussion and help the Natural Infrastructure Plan along.
Thank you so much. We so appreciate your time. It's been a really valuable session. We will be sending out the recording of this afterwards. We'll send out links to a quick survey, but we'll also attach the investment decision toolkit as well, so you've got access to that. We will also be running another webinar very shortly, so look out for that, which will be around regional resilience, be based on our work we've done in the Bay of Plenty around natural capital regional resilience. So look out for that. We'll just give you a few more minutes back in your lunch break. So thank you all so much for attending today. A huge thanks to Sam, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.